Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Episode 87, Homegrown Hate. War Baby here with another episode of Murderous Minors. Does raising a child in an environment of hate equal raising a child in an environment that lacks love? Could a parent obsessed with building a country based on race separatism also be a loving caregiver to their children? We'll contemplate that first on this episode of Murderous Minors, then look at two cases of teen murderers with ties to the former neo-Nazi group AtomWaffen Division. This episode contains descriptions of violence against children, sexual abuse, and I play 911 calls. Friends and supporters of Jeff Hall knew him to be a devoted father, and felt that the hate-filled ideology he surrounded his 5 young children with had little impact on them. By 2011, the 32-year-old underemployed plumber was using his home in suburban Riverside, California, as sort of a home base of operations for his branch of the National Socialist Movement. The group, which a decade ago was the largest neo-Nazi organization in America, had chapters in almost all 50 states, and Jeff Hall had become a fast-rising leader. The house in Riverside, a city and county just east of Los Angeles, is in an area known as the Inland Empire and was owned by Jeff's mother. When the bubble burst a few years earlier and construction dried up around him, he entered a period of unemployment from which he never emerged. Jeff, his second wife Krista, his son and daughter from his first marriage, and the 3 daughters the pair had together resided there, where he held endless NSM gatherings. From backyard barbecues and baby showers to monthly meetings, the Halls were a family seemingly deeply entrenched in white supremacist ideology. Jeff had even run for the Western Municipal Water District Board of Directors in Riverside County as a member of the National Socialist Party. Though he didn't win, he vowed he would try again. Throughout March and April of 2011, journalist Julie Plattner was already chronicling Jeff Hall in the National Socialist Movement. She had been on the scene with him early in April in New Jersey at the NSM's National Conference, catching on film his participation in a street fight near a rally, and she was there filming inside the family home on April 30th, 2011, at the group's monthly meeting in Riverside, California. Jeff's son Joseph can be seen in the footage running in and out, then sitting on the stairs just feet away from where his physically imposing father stood addressing the NSM members assembled in their living room. At 10 years old, he had already endured a trauma-riddled life. His grandmother said that she could never babysit him. He was too much for her to handle, and his parents weren't having much success in figuring out how to help him. They'd divorced shortly after he turned 1, and though the split began with a joint custody arrangement, Jeff Hall ultimately petitioned and was awarded full custody of Joseph and his younger sister. He accused his ex-wife's boyfriend of sexual abuse and said that when the kids returned from their care, they were aggressive and clearly had not been fed enough. Even at 2 years old, Jeff wrote, his son was, quote, constantly abusive toward everyone, was always in attack mode, and was unruly and impossible to control. She, in turn, alerted the court that her ex-husband was violent, had anger issues, abused drugs and alcohol, and was the president of a neo-Nazi group, making her fear for the safety of her children. Child Protective Services made contact with the family over 20 times, though no tangible issues ever resulted in intervention by the agency, and Jeff Hall received full custody when Joseph was 5. He began dating Krista in late 2007, whom he met as he slid into the dark world of race separatism. Reports indicate that her sister was killed in an auto accident attributed to a driver who was in the U.S. illegally. By the start of President Obama's first term, Jeff had found the NSM, spending most of his time on it, even raising his children in the lifestyle and with the music popular with the white power set. His son even accompanied Jeff to the Mexican border to patrol for illegal crossing activity, and he was later caught on tape talking about it.
My son was able to operate a Gen 1 night vision in the infrared scope. At the age of 9, my son's out at the border.
As a youngster, Joseph was prone to explosive outbursts and stabbed his teacher with a pencil. A few years later, he tried to choke a different teacher with a telephone cord. He was unable to sit still in class and exhibited violent behaviors such as biting, hitting, and scratching toward his teachers, classmates, sisters, and stepmother. These outbursts led to repeated disciplinary actions, suspensions, and expulsions from 6 different schools, resulting in his parents deciding to homeschool him. Though he lived in a house with 2 parents, reports indicate that he lacked many of the basic necessities of a comfortable life. For example, the kids had bedrooms, but they smelled of urine and the beds were soiled. The children clearly had clothes, as they could be seen strewn about the house, as were empty beer bottles, according to a later arrest report. And although Joseph had a new Nazi insignia belt buckle, his sneakers had holes in them. At least 3 unsecured firearms, ammunition, and multiple bladed weapons were accessible to the children, and Joseph had already been trained by his father to shoot. Television also seemed to be unsupervised because in the early months of 2011, Joseph watched an episode of a primetime drama that he would later say planted the seed of an idea in his young mind, where the thought lay dormant but only for a while. Jeff Hall's continuing volatility kept it close. The boy was also scared about losing Krista, whom he referred to as his mom, thinking she may tire of the constant abuse he says they endured and leave the family, or that his father would leave. He had noticed his dad texting another woman, especially when his stepmom wasn't around, and this only compounded his feelings that his family was headed for a split. He thought his dad was having an affair and that this would lead him to not knowing which parent he was supposed to live with. At the National Socialist Movement meeting on the final day of April 2011, the kids were reprimanded to get out of the way throughout, and Joseph had been spanked, things that happened every day in his life, according to his stepmother. She would later say that they drank whiskey with their guests, and when the meeting was done, Jeff left to drive some people home. While he was gone, she says, he texted her multiple times, telling her to move out because he was seeing someone else. They fought when he returned home and then watched a movie, after which he fell asleep on the living room couch. Hours later, around 4 a.m., his 10-year-old son quietly retrieved the loaded .357 Magnum from its holster on a low shelf of the master bedroom closet as Krista slept nearby. Standing just about where his father had stood hours before, conducting his meeting, the 10-year-old used 4 fingers to cock the gun and 2 to fire a bullet into the back of his father's head as he slept, from a distance of about 1 foot. He immediately ran back upstairs and hid the gun under his bed and hid beneath his covers, telling Krista that he'd shot Dad as he passed her on the stairs.
911 emergency.
My son shot my husband. I need an ambulance. He's bleeding.
How old is your son?
10.
How old is your son?
10. Oh, my God.
Initially, Krista had told responding officers that she had shot her husband in a bid to try and cover up for her stepson. However, it quickly was evident that the boy wasn't aware of or interested in that happening. She and the 5 children were ushered outside, and an officer's belt recorder captured audio of Joseph's 9-year-old sister saying something like, "I thought you were going to shoot him in the stomach," leading prosecutors to believe that the murder was planned. The boy stated that he was sick of his father hitting him and his stepmother and asked an officer something like, "Do people get more than one life?" He inquired about whether his dad was injured or dead, and according to the officer present, seemed remorseful and sorry he'd killed his father. He'd said that, quote, "this father versus son thing had to come to an end," and voluntarily stated that he had been the one to pull the trigger. Even still, the officers who responded did not believe that he would be arrested due to his young age and his small stature. According to GQ magazine, once at the station, Krista was present with her stepson during his videotaped interrogation, and this would later be considered inappropriate and a conflict of interest. The tape shows the detective walking through each line of the Miranda rights with the boy, who could not properly explain the meaning of "you have the right to remain silent." When asked to confirm he understood the difference between right and wrong by giving an example of something he had done that was wrong, he offered up the example of how he'd shot his dad. He was allowed to waive his right to an attorney. The murder of Jeff Hall prompted legislation in California, SB 1052, designed to better protect minors who come in contact with the justice system, requiring they consult with a guardian or attorney prior to being interrogated. He described how his dad had thrown a glass and cut his stepmother's face, and how he had just said that he was going to disable the home's smoke detectors and burn the house down with his family asleep inside. Angered by all of this, he told police he, quote, "wanted everything to stop and thought it would be a good idea to end it, to shoot my dad in the head. I shot him because I was upset. He was always taking off." He told the detective about watching that television show, reported by one source as being an episode of Law & Order SVU and by another source as an episode of Criminal Minds, which showed a young boy shoot and kill his father, but face no consequences because he told the truth, describing it by saying, quote, "a bad father did something to his kids and the kid did the exact same thing I did. He shot him. He wasn't in trouble or anything. I thought maybe the exact same thing would happen to me." His dad was roughest on him, he told them, and he said that he had hidden the gun so it wouldn't seem like he did it on purpose. The boy said he thought his dad would be dead after he shot him, but also said, quote, "I just thought maybe he might learn a lesson. I was trying to get him to know how I feel when I get hurt. Then maybe we could go back to being friends and start all over," before telling his stepmom, "I just think I'm gonna miss Dad kinda, if he's dead." At trial, which began on October 30th, 2012, the psychologist for the defense testified that the then 12-year-old had endured both prolonged sexual and physical abuse throughout the duration of his young life. He now stood 5'4" and had gained almost 20 pounds while in juvenile custody. His younger sister testified that her brother had indeed told her prior to the shooting that he intended to shoot their dad. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity. Insanity, the defense contended, was brought on, then exacerbated by abuse, neglect, and trauma caused by his father's violent and racist beliefs. The environment of hate and the culture of gun appreciation in the home cultivated an atmosphere where violence seemed an appropriate solution, they said. His public defender stressed that his client was young enough to not fully know right from wrong, though in California at the time, there had to be confirmation that he knew his actions were wrong in order for him to have